because as I was saying before, you know, to be human is to be in relationship. And if there's a filter between me and you, it's going to be very difficult. The relationship is going to be able to develop, but there's going to be these other kind of yearnings that are happening in us that we can kind of feel, but they can't respond to anything, and nothing else is responding to them. Like one of the ways that I've kind of described it is when I teach, when I'm in person, I really feel my audience, whether that's 2 people or whether it's 200 people. I feel my audience and I'm engaging with them in a very subtle way, not just, hello, I'm Jeff Reid, Kung Fu, blah, 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 but like really feeling into the audience. You know, I remember when I did a speech at my friend's wedding a few years ago. I remember when I went to Ireland. And, you know, public speaking is fun for me. I've been doing it since I was, I don't know, 16 or 17. I just think it's fun because you can kind of play like an orchestra, but only if you're getting some kind of feedback. And all of that can be atmospheric in the same way that we feel it's going to rain, or we feel, ooh, the pressure just changed, or ooh, when I walk into this room, I don't like how it feels, but we can't really say why I don't like how it feels. We can if we develop a more nuanced understanding of what it is to be human and to be a part of nature, which again, all we are is relationship. Relationship with what is not important. Relationship, you know. And so when I teach online, it's sort of the way I was describing it the other day, is that when I'm teaching, it's like there are these sort of invisible tendrils kind of reaching out and pulling information back of like, how's this landing? But when I'm teaching online, those tendrils are still going out, but they're not pulling anything back. And so it becomes a very isolated experience. You know, I was talking to a friend of mine who teaches online for a Chinese medicine school, and she said all of her students have their screens off and are muted, so she doesn't even know if she's talking to anyone. You know, this is insane to me. You know, this is insane to me.
Yeah.
You know, so we're not. To be human, to me, is a process of whole, not just this and staring at the screen. It's everything. You know, it's not.
And then to flip that over from the student's perspective,
Yeah.
say you're in a setting where you're either beginning, you want to start a journey of Wudang martial arts and cultivation, or you're trying to maintain your existing practice, and your only option is a Zoom, you know, access code in your room.
Yeah.
What would you recommend people prioritize to guide them in getting the best out of that kind of a situation?
What I would say is the general thing that I tell all of my students is to maintain an open curiosity at all times, and to remember that any and all learning that we engage in as practitioners is going to come from practice. And so, you know, it's very difficult for us to be part of a practice lineage if we're not actually practicing. And so if we're just showing up to a lecture and la-di-da, just watch TV. You know, it's we have to practice. And if we're not practicing, if it's I'm new and I want to hear some information, to remember to kind of maintain a basic view that reflects what we are as human, which is nature, which is open, which means let's see what happens when I reserve my sort of expectations as a participant or as a customer, right? Because most of these classes have to be transacted, and when it's online, it really becomes a transaction. And so to instead kind of, as we're engaging in this learning, to sort of maintain a real open curiosity about what it is that's happening, what it is that we're learning from a teacher, and to see how, when that teaching ends, how is it that I integrate this into my life? You know, because my students are not going to go train 10 hours a day for 7 years here in America. That's not going to happen. I don't want that. You know, it doesn't, you know, it's like I said to you before, Giles, you know, it's like, you know, you don't need to go live in a cave unless you do. And if you do, go, but don't wait any more time. You know, don't waste any more time. And so it's simply keeping keeping an open awareness and sticking to, one of the things that I always tell my students, and which I've said a few times now, is I don't know is the most honest thing you can say. And when you say I don't know, it opens up your experience vastly. And especially in a time now where people are starting to explore what does it mean to be doing this practice in a way where I'm so distant, right? But if you understand that to be in relationship doesn't necessarily mean to be physically with someone. I mean, I haven't talked to my master, and I used to see him, between 12 and 20 hours a day for 7 years. I don't remember the last time I talked to him, but my relationship hasn't changed, and my relationship has changed with him, but the core thread of it hasn't changed. It's never going to. It's, how can, a hermit live in the mountains and never talk to anybody, but still maintain perfect relationship with people? It's simply by recognizing that core thread of what it is to be human, which is always to be in relationship, not with anything, but just to be in relationship. And so, while it may be a frustrating time to be engaging in practice or to be engaging in learning, adaptability, that's what we do. You fall and then you get back up. You accidentally break a student's ribs, and then it's a fun story you get to tell later and remind yourself to be a little softer with people. Yeah, so it's that that adaptability is such a big key for students. And the thing is, I'm saying that as a teacher, and all a teacher is just a more experienced student. That's it. It doesn't mean, I put my hair in a top knot and wear Taoist clothes, and and that means I have all of the answers. Like, no, I'm just fumbling around just like you.
So while we're talking about teaching and fumbling and
Mhm.
maybe more developed ideas too, do you want to let people know what you're currently up to with online activities, what you've got going on
Yeah.
now and in the future?
Yeah, so I've actually, this week I'll be concluding a little sort of online guest lecture kind of series with my Kung Fu sister. I guess we could call her Kung Fu sister or Kung Fu cousin, Lindsay Wei. So I'll be doing a lecture on Tuesday the 26th at 11 a.m. Pacific time, California time. And then in the upcoming months, I'm going to continue to be doing a few lectures as well as hosting some guest lectures with some of my Kung Fu brothers. And then I think probably in April, I'm going to be doing a month-long introduction to Taoist meditation where, people will be able to come and not be overwhelmed by information, but instead will be able to kind of truly have their own access to a practice by first introducing a basic view of the practice, introducing the basic methodology of the practice, and then a week away, practicing every day. And then we get together the next week, another lecture, a lot of question and answer where people can kind of check in and people can feel that they're part of that community while at the same time having access to the community at all times by knowing I'm doing this practice. And yeah, I mean, as far as online teaching, I'm just planning on kind of continuing my own doing lectures and doing some of these kind of more basic, really accessible practices. Yeah,
That's great. And there's a link to Jeff's website below as we speak right now.
mm, mm.
You want to hit that?
Thanks.
Yeah. My final question is, have you had students in the last year who've been recovering from COVID themselves or
Mm,
related conditions where they're having to kind of start again from kind of ground
mm,
zero? And have you got any kind of
yeah.
advice for people who are in that position, coping with maybe fatigue or pain and wanting
Mm,
to
mhm.
start their journey from that place?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no perfect health, and there's never going to be. Um, I haven't had any students that have reported to me, at least, that they've had COVID, but I have had several students go through several periods of health crisis.
Mm.
And one of the things that I always try to remind them of is that we have to question what practice really is, because practice is not, doing, single whip and Tai Chi. Practice from a Taoist perspective, like I was saying before, begins with observation. you know, as I sort of ear bleedingly always repeat, you know, there's a line in the Tao Te Ching that's always misinterpreted, which, you know, it's always translated on, you know, your Starbucks cup or whatever, your tea bag, as the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. Uh, it says zu xia. The last two characters in that are zu xia. You can interpret that as stepping, but to me it means just under the feet, which means not moving. And so to me, the first approach to sort of stepping on the path of Taoist practice is to first take stock, which is why the practice of stillness is so essential in my teaching, to kind of find what it is you have to work with, to find what your actual situation is. Because if you don't know what your actual situation is, who knows what it is that you're stepping out into and what kind of harm you may be doing to yourself and you may be doing to others. And that's what I mean about that sort of honesty of practice. And so, you know, I've had a couple of students go through some very difficult health crises, and I've told them to stop coming to class. And that was really hard for them, really, really hard for them to understand why, until I told them, I said, you don't know what practice is. You come to practice and you just get injured over and over. You get sick again. I said, stay at home. Find out what real practice is. Just sit, and let me show you how to cook, right? Because the basic ground of Taoist practice is not some kind of pageantry magic trick. It's not about playing dress up and waving a sword around. It's like, yeah, swords are great. I love swords. This is my favorite. I'm looking at one right across from me right now, you know. But it's, how did you sleep last night? You know, how's your digestion? So the ground of Taoist practice is in that embodiment. It's in these basic things. That's why we call a lot of Taoist practice hygiene. Or in that same story, the Butcher Ding story from the Zhuangzi, you know, I think that's the first mention of Yangsen practice, you know, which is so deeply connected with Taoism. Yangsen just means life, cultivating life. And so my general suggestion around that is to give yourself what you need. And if you want to know what you need, you have to listen, because there is an innate wisdom to being human, and it's in understanding our embodiment. You know? Yeah. So when we do things like a sitting practice or standing practice, what's going to happen is things are going to reveal themselves to us. Oh, my back hurts. Maybe it's because you sit like this all the time. Oh, my neck hurts. Maybe it's because you drive like this all the time. And so if we want to improve where we're at, the first thing that we have to know is where we're at. And so it's not where are you going, it's where are you? Are you getting what you need right now? Because anything else you do on top of that is going to be extra, which means you're going to be taking reserves of things that you need, right? So if I have, if I'm always fatigued, but I feel like I have to show up and do long fist 400 times, this is not Taoist practice. This is a form of self-abuse in a way, in a sense, you know? And so the hard, again, back to the honesty piece, the hard part of Taoist practice is that look in the mirror. And yet that's where the truly deep wisdom comes from. That's why in Chinese we say 死道九医, which means that if there are 10 Taoists, 9 of them are doctors. You know, 10 Taoists, 9 are doctors. It doesn't mean they're all out, you know, running clinics, but it means because so much of the practice is in that stillness and in understanding what it means to be human, then a great, deep, penetrating wisdom ends up coming in. And so we start to know how to move into the world by simply gazing into ourselves, you know? So in that recovery time, to make sure that we're not rushing out to exhaust ourselves yet again, you know? Yeah. One of the things that I often say is that in the world that we live in right now, people are willing to do anything and everything to feel okay, except the one thing that may actually be of some benefit, which is nothing, is to please just stop. Just stop and watch a little bit. You know, me too. You know.
I think that's a wonderful place for us to conclude. Thank you so much, Shifu. That's
Of course. Yeah.
really,